Welcome, thanks for being here. I have to admit I own more Dior than I can defend. There is Sauvage on my table, the blue bestseller I'm supposed to look down on next to the vintage chypres I actually respect, and I reach for both without blushing. I own the severe old Miss Dior, whose name got stolen, and the sweet young thing that stole it, and I've never made either apologize. I own two versions of a single cologne because I keep believing the next one will last. This isn't a collection. It's a hostage situation, and I've lost track of which side I'm on. So today we go inside Dior, past the gift shop, into the belly of the house to see which perfumes it fed and which it swallowed, and how one label makes both the most handmade masterpiece in the business and the most optimized object on the shelf, and charges you for the confusion. Dior is the house where the artist and the machine changed places, and it starts with one obsessive, alone in a garden, and ends with its bestseller leaving a shelf somewhere every 30 seconds. You can walk the whole distance by asking one rude question of every bottle. Whose hands were on it? The auteur? The hired guns? Then two salaried men who couldn't agree what a perfume's for. So 2 pictures for the next hour. A gardener spreadsheet. Dior has spent 80 years insisting these are opposites. They are the same machine, pointed in 2 directions. Let's find out which one has me. Parfums Christian Dior was its own company from day one, not a scent stapled to a dress label. Separate business. Money from the textile baron Marcel Broussac, run by Dior's school friend Serge Heffler-Louis, straight from Coty, who knew exactly what a bottle is for. It sells the dress to the woman who cannot afford the dress. And the romance arrived with an accountant already in it. The house loves to say its first perfume launched on the day of the new look. It didn't. The show was February, the company March, the perfume December, a charming fib. The first of roughly 400. Miss Dior gets its own chapter in a minute because it is less a perfume with a recognizable history than an object with different dimensions passed between 4 hands. For now, the house opened with a severe green chypre, credited to Jean Carles and Paul Vacher, then found the man who decided what Dior meant by art. Edmond Roudnitska worked up at Cabri above Grasse at a deliberate distance from the industry, composing the way other people write string quartets. Learn his signature and you feel it everywhere. He took things out while his rivals stacked notes to prove a perfume was expensive. He built a spare chypre skeleton and let the light through. He heard what a molecule could do a decade before the labs did, and he did a little rot tucked inside the pretty to keep the beauty honest. He answered to one customer, himself, which is why the work is so good and why no one could manage him. Diorama, late 1940s, right? His first full Dior. I wear the current boutique version. The old one, over here, goes on edible and expensive peach and plum borrowed from his own Rochas femme over a base of Oakmoss and animal castoreum. Wozniacki at Perfume Shrine puts it between femme and Mitsuku. Luca Turin, smelling the real thing, said it was not the rubbish they sell you now. I own the rubbish. Now, Diorissimo, 1956, is the one that made his name. It's lily of the valley that cannot be distilled. You ring it and it gives you nothing. It's the floral equivalent of a cat that adores you only when you're allergic. Every muguet from a bottle is a fake, because a real one is impossible, and Roudnitska built the most convincing fake anyone has managed on a molecule called hydroxycitronello, with a little civet underneath, so the innocence has a pulse. The copy is so good it can spoil the real flower for you. I own the old cologne. Oof. And the concentration is the whole lesson. In the vintage X-ray, the civet is a heavy animal flaw, and in my cologne, it barely registers. The flower, cold and green, photographic, gone within the hour. Diorella, Roudnitska's favourite and his dirtiest joke. It opens bright and shrill, then an overripe melon rises over the jasmine, decay and freshness in standoff over a base like a forest floor after rain. Barbara Herrmann, at yesterday's perfume, admits it can smell, in August, like a compost heap that has read Proust. I have the current version, which brings me to the important one. Eau Sauvage, 1966, Dior's first men's scent, and one of the load-bearing bottles in the whole art. I own a couple of versions, which is a symptom, not a flex. Roudnitska built it on Hedione and was first to really use it. That lit from within radiance, every fresh scent has chased since. The smell of costly air starts in a 1966 cologne. The eau de toilette opens like cold lemon rind over green herbs and then fizzes and leaves. Gone in half an hour now the Oakmoss floor is quieted. A commenter online said the modern Eau Sauvage needs gluten, and I've never improved on it. The 2012 Parfum is not a bigger eau de toilette. It's a different perfume. Behind the same badge by a different man, François Demachy, the salaried nose, who turns out to be the hinge of the whole story. It goes on, watery, and then a green mare takes the wheel. Its notes, in Kevin's phrase, that now smell this, knocking into each other like pool balls. The 2015 cologne is the lightest. It's a splash that flatters and flees. One name, 3 arguments about what a perfume is even for, and I keep all of them so I can settle it on 1 or 2 wrists. Roudnitska didn't invent Hedione. He heard its future before the chemists who made it, which is the job. Not owning the molecule, hearing the tune inside it, and he did it alone in a garden for a house that let him, which is the last time this house lets anyone do anything alone. Miss Dior is named for Catherine Dior, Christian's younger sister, and I will tell you who she was without a single joke, because she is the one thing in this house that outranks the perfume. Catherine Dior was in the Resistance, and the Gestapo arrested her in Paris in 1944, tortured her, and deported her to Ravensbrück. She came back roughly 18 months before a perfume went out under her name. There is a legend that the muse, Mitza Bricard, watched her walk into the salon and cried, "Voila, Miss Dior!" and named it on the spot. The legend is a legend. The dedication is real, and it is the most serious thing this frivolous house has ever done. Vacher and Karl's built her a green chypre, and it opens cold and bitterly green, galbanum like a snapped stem, still wet on your fingers, and then warms up and turns feral. Under the prim florals, there is a cat in season, and in the old juice, a smoky Russian leather over amber. Robin had now smelled this settled the vintage register for good. Smoked cigarettes, stale corsages, and Russian novels. It smells like a woman who has read the will and is not crying. I own the deposed tween in triplicate. Miss Dior Original, the Eau de Parfum, the green chypre from before the robbery. The Esprit de Parfum, the same soul at higher proof, and, because a collection tells in its owner, the 2021 Miss Dior that my daughter wears, the sweet pink thing that mugged the other two for the name. Here is the robbery in 4 hands. In 2005, Dior gave the name to Christine Nagel, later of Hermès, and asked for something gourmand for a teenager. She made Miss Dior Chérie, a strawberry popsicle drowning in buttered popcorn, no animal within a mile of it, and a fine piece of work for what it is. Then in 2011, the house did the cold thing. It peeled the words Miss Dior off the green chypre and stuck them on the sweet one. The resistance fighter's perfume got a consolation prize suffix. Original, the fragrance equivalent of the children's table at your own wedding. Sitting here, smelling my Original, a stern soul with the floor torn out. The real question asks itself, did the customer's taste change, or did the reformulation change it for her? Demachy finished the job. He reworked the modern Miss Dior, and in 2014 built its lightest child, blooming Bouquet, a watery peony with no Oakmoss and no leather, gone by lunch and outselling them all. In 60 years, the name Miss Dior travelled from leather and civet beast worn by a woman who survived a death camp to a clean floral that evaporates before the meeting ends. 4 hands, each gentler than the last. Nobody set out to insult Catherine Dior. A franchise ate its own founder, which is what franchises are for. A garden that becomes, or should I say a garden that works, becomes a portfolio. And a portfolio doesn't wait for a genius in the hills to hear the future. Through the 80s and 90s, Dior did what everyone did. It hired the best hand for each job out of the big labs. The fun part is you can smell precisely who is hired, because these people have signatures as legible as handwriting. Poison. 1985 is Edouard Flechier, whose signature is nerve. I own the Eau de Toilette, and it goes on like a threat. Purple plum and coriander, sticky as liqueur. And then the tuberose arrives. Syrupy and enormous. The smell that announces you from the far end of a corridor. Luca Turin said wearing it was like driving a tank through rush hour because people simply move. Poison never wanted to be liked. It took the decade precisely because it never asked. Fahrenheit. 1988 is Jean-Louis Suizac with Michel Almerac, whose signature is selling a strange idea to a shopping mall. The original is a famous shock, a petrol reek that is really a violet leaf pushed until it smells like the start of a fire. You know, where Fleshier wanted the room. Swisak wanted your attention and got it by putting gasoline and flowers on a department store counter and daring you to buy them. You did. What I own is not that bottle. Mine is Fahrenheit Le Parfum 2014, and it carries the tell of this whole episode. A house hand went back and warmed it over. The petrol is almost turned off, and in its place, mandarin and licorice over suede, then leather, through a smoky amber, and then bourbon vanilla. It's darker and sweeter than the original. It's like a mugger sent to a finishing school. The hand was François Demachy, who would pull the same trick on Eau Sauvage, and then bold. Sauvage. Dior Addict 2002 is Thierry Vasser, years before he took over Guerlain and its 200-year vault, the man who now guards the crown jewels of French perfumery cut his teeth on a loud modern vanilla. His original was dark and boozy with something filthy under it. Mine is the 2014, where the hand changes again to Demachy, who scrubbed it up. It's a brighter citrus under a prettier vanilla. Where am I going to spray you? I think my hand. It's a party dress you can wear all night. And the eau de parfum is the good one. Skip the current eau de toilette. It's a ghost with a head cold. 2 strengths, 1 name, and a wide gulf between them, which is the house's favourite trick. J'adore is Khalees Becker, whose signature is radiant abstraction. I don't own it. Pear and melon over a seamless gold floral, engineered to flatter everyone alive. No sneering. Becker is a master, and J'adore invented the whole genre of clean and expensive. Its later life, though, has mostly been dilution. One gold idea watered into a dozen flankers. The spreadsheet doing arithmetic. 4 perfumes, 4 hands, hired like session players, each for the one thing their signature did best, and you can name the man from the feeling. They're wonderful bottles, most of them, but somewhere in there they stopped being one man's obsession and became assets with faces and release dates. A garden grows what it grows. A portfolio grows whatever sells. Then in 2006, Dior did the telling thing. It stopped renting hands by the job and put a nose on staff full-time, its own. A post empty since Roudnitska freelanced for it. Within 15 years, it hired a second who disagreed with the first about almost everything. The whole argument of the house lives in the gap between the 2 men. You know, every luxury house solves one problem, and it is harder than it looks. How do you make a thing feel rare while making 12 million of it? You know, rarity and scale are supposed to cancel out. Luxury is the trick of keeping both of them in one bottle. And Demachy and Kurkdjian answer from opposite ends of the factory. Demachy answers in the dirt, grass to the bone, a pharmacist's son, at Dior since 2006, and before that, 22 years at Chanel. Read that twice. The keeper of the Dior flame trained on Chanel's. The pool of people who can do this work is smaller than the marketing admits, and they have all worked for one another. The Chanel he left belongs to Jacques Polge, whose son Olivier was across town composing Dior Homme. a powdery iris so soft it reads as lipstick. 5 stars from Turin and Sanchez. Demachy ripped that iris out in 2020 redo, and the fans mourned it like a death. The reformulation story again, this time in a suit. Demachy's religion is the raw material. He talks about an ingredient the way a chef talks about a heritage tomato, and his one condition for the Dior job was not money or title, it was the sourcing. He wanted to pick the actual flowers and then arrange for nobody else to have them. And this is where the garden becomes a fortress. Above Grasse, a 4th-generation grower named Carol Biancalana runs Domaine de Manon and grows her May rose and jasmine, essentially for Dior, which she will tell you herself. A second farm hands over its whole rose crop. Dior bought back Christian Dior's old chateau and built a lab down the road stocked with 2,000 essences. The numbers are the wall. Grasse Rose Absolu runs about 15,000 euros a kilo against 2,000 for the Moroccan. A kilo of jasmine costs 6 million flowers. A full day's harvest at Domaine de Manon and makes roughly 1 bottle. What Demachy locked into those long contracts was not roses, it was scarcity, the one thing all of LVMH's money still cannot print. And here's the crack that makes him human. The apostle of real flowers also built Sauvage, mostly a woody amber molecule grown in a tank. The house that owns the rose fields makes its best sellers out of chemistry, Roudnitska's Hedione included. Natalie Portman runs through real grass fields in the advert while selling a liquid that is largely lab. Not hypocrisy, just the honest condition of perfume now. And Demachy lived on both sides of it, the romantic of the soil who signed the biggest synthetic on the planet. Which brings me to Sauvage. And yes, I do own it, so I will not sneer at the best-selling fragrance in the world. Let me spray it on skin. And where will I spray you? I will spray you on this hand. It opens cold and peppery, a clean electric snap, the smell of a man who just showered and needs you to know. 20 minutes in, the citrus thins and the real thing surfaces a dry, salty, woody amber that hums for hours, and on me it is bright and blank, and on a morning when I need my perfume to keep its opinions to itself, blank is the service I'm paying for, and by Dior's own count, it sells 12 million bottles a year, 1 every 30 seconds, #1 in 40 countries. Critics call it a blue nothing, the smell of a phone screen. Kevin at Now Smell This heard a household cleaner curdling into ozone and ambroxan, and he's not wrong. Neither are the 12 million. Wanting to smell like clean air and good intentions is a decent wish, and Demachy, the man of the rose fields, built it better than anyone alive. But here is the part the name on the box hides. A blockbuster like this is not composed the way Roudnitska composed, alone, pleasing himself. It is briefed by marketing, thrown open to the big suppliers as a competition, steered round after round by an evaluator whose notes all say warmer and cheaper, then smelled blind by panels of the exact customer it's aimed at, who rated on whether it reads as clean and pulls a compliment. The version that ships is the one that scores highest, not the one a critic would call interesting. Sauvage smells like a committee because a committee is in it. Roudnitska answered to one nose, his own. Sauvage answers to a focus group, and a focus group has impeccable taste in exactly one thing: being reassured. The Eau de Parfum went sweeter on vanilla. The 2021 Elixir spiced lavender over licorice is the one the snobs allow themselves to enjoy. Same machine, sold clean at the counter and serious in the private drawer. Occasionally, the machine drives into a wall. In 2019, a Sauvage teaser decided the way to sell cologne was Native American imagery under the words, "We are the land," and Dior pulled it within hours, having workshopped everything about the campaign except whether to make it. That is what a spreadsheet does when it optimizes for impact and forgets to ask a human being a single question. In 2021, Demachy retired and Dior handed the keys to Francis Kurkdjian, who solves the same problem from the other end. Not the soil, the story. Kurkdjian is nobody's backroom technician. He made Le Mal for Gaultier in 1995 at 25, then built his own house, the Baccarat Rouge people, the most screenshotted scent of the decade, which, full disclosure, I own, along with his Grand Soir, because the man can genuinely compose. LVMH bought most of his house in 2017 and left him running it. So Dior didn't hire a craftsman. It hired a craftsman who is also his own legend, precisely the skill the moment rewards. Roudnitska heard the future in a molecule. Demachy grew it in a field, and Kurkdjian sells the story that it happened. Now, the detail that made me put the research down. La Collection Privée, the hushed, expensive line that says you've graduated past the pillars, launched in 2004, 2 years before Demachy walked in. One of its 3 founding scents, Eau Noire, was Kurkdjian, a gorgeous oddity, medicinal lavender shoved aside by immortelle at full volume, maple syrup and burnt sugar over black licorice and coffee. Kafkaesque, logged nearly 15 hours of it. About a quarter of everyone else just smells curry. I don't own it, so that is her skin, not mine, but the timing is delicious. The man who took over Dior in 2021 already had a perfume inside its most exclusive collection before the man he replaced arrived. Side door in 2004, front door in 2021, and nobody clocked the 17 years between. Where Demachy guarded the soil, Kurkdjian runs the back catalogue like an estate sale with excellent lighting. Since 2021, he's rebuilt Miss Dior into a new parfum and staged higher strength reissues of things Dior already owned, launched at Harrods, which is a sentence about retail theatre, not flowers. His gift is understanding what a perfume has become. A picture you post and a thing you rebuy one strength up. An event the house can throw again whenever the quarter looks thin. Side by side, there is no bad guy, only 2 men answering one question. Demachy makes the flower rare, so the bottle feels precious. Kurkdjian makes the moment rare, so the bottle feels necessary. The house went from one obsessive, alone in the hills, to a Rolodex of rented signatures, to 2 salaried men who cannot agree what rare even means. I've been circling the single most profitable thing Dior does, so here's my opinion, and I hold it hard. The engine of a modern perfume house is not the perfume, it is the flanker. A flanker is a spin-off. Take a bottle that sells a pillar, release a variation, an intense, an elixir, a Le Parfum, Same name, new suffix, then do it again next year. Every pillar here is really a litter. Poison had 5 more after it. You know, J'adore has spawned a dozen, and Sauvage is already a staircase of concentrations. The logic is printed on the shelves. Extend the pillar without touching its core, hit a new price, catch a new generation, refresh every 18 months so the counter always has news and hold the ranking. Superb business, and the slow method by which a great name forgets what it meant. And here's where I refuse to be lazy, because I own the best argument against my own cynicism, and it is called Hypnotic Poison. In 1998, 13 years after Poison, over here, let me find the title, Poison, ate the 80s, Dior released a flanker that shares the same name and nothing else. Fleshier's original is a bitter purple tuberose bomb, and Hypnotic Poison by a different hand, a Nick Menado, is a sweet, almond gourmand and one of my favourite things in the building. Let me see where I shall spray you, Hypnotic Poison. Where? I think I might have to spray you here. It opens on cold, bitter almond and marzipan and cherry pit, sharp as extract off the spoon, and then it softens and jasmine into coconut cream, the extract turning to custard over a plush vanilla in a clean metallic musk. It lasts 12 hours and will haunt a coat for a week. Its lovers, and I am one, prefer it to the original and admit so quietly. Its detractors smell cherry cough syrup. And so here's why it counts. Hypnotic Poison is a flanker that became a signature, not the parent thin for a younger customer, but a new idea that earned a name of its own and grew more loved than the bottle it was spun from, without laying a finger on it. It earned its keep because a real perfumer with the real idea was let into the room. That is my verdict on flankers, and it comes in 3 kinds. The first is the gift, a new idea that takes the name of its own and leaves the parent standing, untouched on the same shelf. Hypnotic Poison is the gift. So is Sauvage Elixir, the spiced lavender fork even the snobs allow themselves. Rare, usually with the real perfumer's name on them, and nobody gets hurt. J'adore is the second kind, the slow leak. The 1999 original is a masterpiece and no one's victim, but the family bolted onto it, the law, the voile, the absolute. His one gold idea is sold at a new price and a new adjective over and over, while the original itself got reformulated sweeter until it drifted toward its own knockoffs. Nobody stabs J'adore. It is being worn through. Miss Dior is the third kind, the theft, and the ugly one. Chérie in 2005 was genuinely a new idea, exactly the sort that earns its own name. It took the old one instead. The chypre, named for a woman who survived a death camp, got sent to the cellar and relabeled Original, so a strawberry could wear its clothes. Not a spin-off, a hostile takeover with a bow on it. So when the next Elixir or Intense or Le Parfum lands, don't only ask whether it is any good. Ask what it did to its own family. A gift brings a new idea and a new name. A leak sells the old idea at a new price. A theft takes the old name and bins the perfume that earned it. You can smell which one you're holding, and it comes down to whether a real perfumer was in the room or only a brief in a lab. There are two lazy ways to talk about this house. The marketing shows you Natalie Portman in a field of real roses and lets you assume your J'adore is a decanted meadow. It isn't. It is mostly the lab. Musks and Hedione and clean ambers doing the lifting, the pricey naturals threaded through in amounts that could never justify the sticker on their own. The cynic's move, the one I police in myself, sees the field, calls it a stage set, calls the whole thing a con, and leaves feeling clever. Also false. Domaine de Manon is a working farm whose harvest genuinely yields about a bottle a day, and Dior really did buy up some of the last jasmine growers in Grasse. That is tens of thousands of euros, a kilo of real scarcity, defended by a balance sheet almost nobody else has. Both things are true at once, and neither cancels the other. The fields are real and the bottle is mostly lab, and a house can mean the flowers sincerely while depending on the chemistry entirely. The romance isn't a lie. It's just not the recipe. And the reason Dior can afford both at once is the character whose name is on none of the bottles. LVMH. The balance sheet that funds the long flower contracts, the chateau, the lab, the capital locked up in the fields that yield a bottle a day, and Dior is not alone. There is a quiet land grab around Grasse. Chanel has its growers through the Mall family. Lancôme bought a rose estate in 2020. And Grasse know-how went onto the UNESCO Heritage List in 2018. A real honor, and, if you're unkind, a marketing certificate for the houses buying the hills. The flower bed that began as one man's eccentricity is now an asset class. The auteur grew a patch to study a smell. The conglomerate buys the valley to protect a franchise. Same instinct, different zeros. And because this channel has no sponsors and nothing to sell you but the argument, I get to say the part the ambassadors won't. You will read that the juice in a luxury bottle costs a fraction of the price, $1 or $2, inside a $150 bottle. Treat it as an estimate, because Dior has never published a number, and neither has anyone who would know. What isn't an estimate is the shape. You are paying for the feel, the chemistry, the chateau, the campaign, the movie star, and the 30-second heartbeat of a bottle leaving a shelf somewhere on earth. The perfume is one line on that invoice, rarely the biggest. It's not an accusation, just what a luxury object is. I own a tray of them. I am the market I'm describing. 12 million bottles a year. One name, one range of hills, all of it descended from a difficult man growing a flower he could never sell, so he could learn to counterfeit it properly. The garden made the spreadsheet possible. The spreadsheet still pays for the garden. Christian Dior sewed sprigs of lily of the valley into his hems for luck, an impossible flower stitched in for superstition, and he would have understood the arrangement completely because he put the accountant in the room on day one and never pretended otherwise. I told you at the top I had lost track of which side I was on, and the answer is not flattering. I know the fields are mostly backdrop and the reformulations thinner than their legends, and the flank is mostly a new price wearing an old name. My hand goes to the shelf tomorrow morning regardless, because the most honest thing a perfume can do is admit it is a gorgeous fake, and then be gorgeous enough that you forgive it. Dior has done that. Since a man in a garden out-argued a flower, the fake got bigger and the fields got realer, and both stayed
true the whole time. Call it a con if you want. I call it the whole reason I own the shelf, and I am cheerfully its ideal victim. So tell me, which Dior is yours? The gardens or the spreadsheets? And do you own a reformulation you love? Anyway, knowing full well it is thinner than the legend. Name it, and tell me whether you've made your peace with it, because I clearly have not. Go and look at your own shelf and find a flanker. Is it a gift? Is it a slow leak or a theft? And the hard question, the one I still can't answer honestly. Do you actually care whose hands were on the bottle once it's warm on your own skin? If you want a perfume channel with no sponsors and nothing to sell you but the argument, subscribe and leave a like. Because that's the only currency I take, and it tells the algorithm the argument was worth having. And the long version, with the sources and everything I couldn't fit into an hour, is waiting on the Perfumed Perspective Substack. See you soon.